Hi, I'm Brenda Coburn from the Santa Rosa Quilt Guild, and I'm going to show you how to make a self-framed baby receiving blanket from 2 pieces of flannel. So it's going to look something like this when we're done. We're going to start with 2 contrasting pieces of cotton flannel, and one of them is going to be cut exactly 40 inches square and the other 30 inches square. Well, I say exactly, it doesn't really have to be exact. It can be slightly more or less, maybe within 2 inches, but it must be square. So if you cut one dimension 28.5 inches, make sure you cut the other dimension the same. That's really important. And then you're going to want to mark the centers of each edge. So you can put a pin in there, or you can put a tiny, tiny little clip with your scissors, but it has to be really small so that it's when we sew along there we don't have a hole. And then we're going to take these 2 pieces and we're going to start sewing them together, right sides together. And we're going to start from the center of each piece. So I'm going to find my little center mark there, and I'm going to put a pin right in the center, and then I'm going to work my way out to the edge. Now, if my pieces are exactly 30 inches and 40 inches, then I should end up with pretty much exactly 5 inches from there to there. And if it's not exactly that, then it might be more or less, but the key is that you want it to be the same on both sides. So if it's 5 inches on one side, you want to see 5 inches on the other side between the edge of the smaller fabric and the edge of the larger fabric. I'm going to pin all along there, and then I'm going to stitch a small seam somewhere between 1/4 and 3/8 of an inch. And I'm going to start and stop at the seam allowance. So I'm not going to go all the way to the edge. I'm going to go to about right there on each side. Okay, so I've sewn across my first edge, starting and stopping a seam allowance away from the end. And now I'm going to turn it around and do exactly the same thing on the opposite edge. So now I've stitched both sides the same way, and it kind of looks like this. And now we're going to go for the other 2 sides, but it's going to feel a little different. Again, we're going to match up those centers and work our way out. But we're going to end up with these kind of wings at the side. So just go ahead and do the pinning all the way out to the edges. And now you can see why it was important to stop the stitching at the seam allowance. So we're going to do the same thing here, and we're going to stitch right into that corner on each side. So now I've stitched along that 3rd edge, and my corners look like that. So we're going to do the 4th side now, but of course we have to leave an opening to turn this thing, so make sure you don't forget that. So again, I'm going to start with the center and work my way out to the sides. But I'm going to make sure that I leave a sufficient opening for turning this one, which I would say would be about 6 or 7 inches. So what I like to do to remind myself where I need to leave the opening is I do cross pins. So I'm going to leave my opening about there. I guess mine's about 7 or 8 inches. Just whatever feels comfortable to pull the whole thing through. And then I'm going to stitch the 4th side minus this opening. Okay, so here's my 4th side sewn with my opening there. And now we have this thing with wings out there. It's not time to turn it yet though. What we're going to do next is we're going to fold it kind of corner to corner like that and try and make it flat. Because what we need to do is mark where we're going to miter the corners. So the way you want to do this is you want to go from where your stitching ended to the fold, and you're going to place your ruler on the fold, so you're going to mark that line 90 degrees from the fold. If you do it 90 degrees from the cut edge, you're going to be in trouble. You won't have enough fabric, so make sure it's from the fold. And maybe you want to stick a pin in there. We're going to sew across there, and then we're going to trim it off. So there you can see I've sewn across that line, and I've trimmed it because we're going to turn it. We want to trim that excess off that corner, so clip it in kind of close. And we're going to do that on all 4 corners. So now all 4 corners have been sewn, and if you hold it up like that, you can kind of see how it's going to be once it's turned. And you can turn it at this point, but I actually like to do a little extra step of pressing. I like to press this seam inward before I turn it so that I know it's always on the inside. But if you don't do that, it could go any which way, and that's okay too. But I like to press mine all to the inside because I think it makes it neater. So I'm going to do that now. And I find it's especially helpful on this edge where there's the opening where I'm going to turn it. I'll go along here and press down that seam allowance the right amount first, and then match it up with the top part. It just makes it neater and easier once you turn it to get it looking right. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and turn it. So I'll find my opening, pull the corners through, and make sure that the corners get really poked out all the way. So then I'm going to shake it out and get it looking even. And I usually like to start with the edge where the opening is. See, since I pressed it, it's hard to even see it. There it is. So there's the opening. And I'll shake it out and make sure that everything looks nice and even. And now I'm going to press those edges down. And the last step is going to be to do an edge stitch right along here, which will close my opening. And the edge stitch can either be just a straight stitch, or you can use a zigzag that goes over both, or you can even use a fancy stitch. And I'll show you an example of that because my friend likes to do the fancy stitch. So that's what her edges look like. So that's an option. You can do it however you like. So now I've stitched it down all the way around, catching in the seam allowance. And so my blanket is done. It's ready to just do a final press and it's finished. So don't throw away the scraps when you're done, because you can make a baby burp cloth, or you could make an infant bib. These are super handy. My daughter used tons of these with her baby. Or you can make washcloths. I just stitched across the center, and I used my serger on the edge of this one, but if you don't have a serger, you could do a turn and top stitch version. Also super handy.